Hey, Susan Finch here today. I am the host for CRM Radio, and my guest today is author and marketing expert Samantha Stone. And look what I have. I don't know if you can
that
see.
makes me so happy.
Look at it's all marked, and I've been highlighting. I am so
Perfect.
excited about your book. We met because of Erica Goldwater, and she said, "I think you two need to meet." And once I read an excerpt from your new book, I want to interview you about this book. And I have to admit, though, Samantha, that when it arrived, I freaked out because I thought it's a workbook. By the size of it, and I thought, oh, crap, I hate workbooks. I don't want to write things. Don't make me work. Just let me read and digest. And I was very pleasantly surprised. It's not a workbook. It has the most tangible, relatable tips in it.
Thank you so much. You know, the size, believe it or not, was the biggest debate that I had about this book. And we went round and round and round because you're correct. It looks like a workbook, but it's not really. And my intent and spirit was that people would do what you're doing, which is mark it up and then actually sit it on their desk, like next to them, so that it would be an ongoing reference. It wouldn't end up on the bookshelf in the library far away from what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. So sorry for the little bit of panic it inspired, but I'm glad you got through the panic and got to its real intention.
Well, I am going to let you talk, but I have to brag on you a bit on this and bring up some points that are in the, I marked some pages that I wanted to talk to you about, some things that really stood out to me. No, I don't work for a huge company. I have some clients that are larger and some that are very small. And so to find things, when you start talking about buyer personas and ABM and all these things, it doesn't always fit all of my clients, but my larger ones, it does. But what I find, and you covered it, there was one page in particular, they said, yuck, stop with all the marketing speak. Now, thank God, because yes, we're all supposed to be professionals and know what all these terms and all these acronyms mean, but until it's put into plain language that is tangible, like talking about your aunt or your Granny Annie, there's no way to, for me to apply it all or to be able to translate it to my clients so that they also understand it. So I greatly appreciate the plain speak, the very relatable stories in there, and the hit list. What's your favorite part of your book?
I'm so glad you asked that. I will tell you that it's going to sound so strange, but the most cathartic part of the book was the introduction. And I had literally 10 versions of my introduction. It's the piece of the book that I rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. And the beginning versions weren't really about me. They were sort of distanced and setting up the problem marketers have. And it was a very traditional sort of look at marketing. And I kept getting feedback from people, no, Samantha, tell them who you are. You're writing this book, tell people who you are. And it was an uncomfortable experience for me at first. But then as I started to think back in my history and where I started and where I began, I realized that it actually was an important setup for how this book was going to take form and what I was going to be talking about in the book, and hopefully make people believe that whether you work for a really big company or you work for a smaller organization, that there were things in here that you would be able to take away. And so for me, the introduction may not be my favorite advice, but it's the favorite part of the book because it was the hardest for me to actually write.
I want to give you some very honest and mixed feedback on that. So the intro for me did a couple of things on first glance. I've met you before, so I know I have a little bit more history. I read that she is so far out of my league, I'm not going to be able to relate to anything she said because of all your vast experience, all of your successes, and they were all spelled out right there. And I had, no, I'm going to do this. This is not very big. I'm going to go through this, and if I can grab something from every chapter, I know she's accomplished what she set out to do. And I could tell that by what that intro was, but it did. It made me like, wait, this is beyond.
Oh! Well, that's really good feedback. I appreciate it. And like I said, it was the hardest part of the book to write because I had a million different versions of what that was going to be.
Right.
it's such an interesting thing. Some people skip the introduction, some people read it. One of the things that I did I think differently, I've never seen it before, but you can tell me if I'm wrong, is I originally was going to do a very traditional forward. I was going to ask a single marketing luminary. I'm fortunate to know very many to write a forward about the state of marketing. And as I was thinking about who the audience for this book was and what I was trying to do, I knew that was the wrong approach. And so I decided to have 3 mini forwards written, one by a CEO, one by an investor, and one by a CMO. Because really, at the end of the day, it's the entire organization that needs marketing, and we don't always think about it. So I really wanted to take that, slightly unconventional approach to the forward, but I hope people read them. They're 3 brilliant people who I feel really fortunate to know, and really grateful they were able to participate and help set up some of their perspective about how they think about marketing. I
did appreciate those 3 different perspectives. So let's dive in a little bit, though, because our time is always short on these shows. One of the parts I really appreciate, buy-in part, and this seems to be a strong hot button for you, and I know it is for me, going into meetings, workshops, etc., no phones, no computer.
Yes.
I feel so strongly on how can you listen, and how can somebody know you're listening to them if you have those, and people that I take notes on my phone or whatever. Matt Hines has covered this too in his shows. Yeah. And so Steve Gershik, it's a different thinking.
Yes. It's so important. Our brains actually cannot do 2 things at once. We think we can because we walk and chew gum, but the brain is actually not doing those 2 things. It's one sort of almost an involuntary type of behavior we're so practiced with, and we're walking, hopefully looking at where we're going and not bumping into things. We really do need to focus. And I'll be honest, this is hard for me personally. I'm a multitasker. I want to do everything all at once. My brain is here, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking about what's for dinner, and then I'm thinking about the next call I have to take. And I had to learn to really focus in on the other people in the room, on the topic that we're talking about. And we simply can't do it with all those distractions. It is not possible for our brains to be fully present and fully aware. Yes, we can be in the room and we can pop up every once in a while and pretend we're paying attention. But when you're under the table with that, your phone typing a message and you think nobody can see you, we can see you. And more important than we can see you, we know that your brain has now gone off to something else, and it's some other context.
Which brings you into your ice cream social chapter. And how can a whole team know that you're focusing? Everybody deserves everybody's full attention. And if you have the common goal of wanting to make the marketing and sales program cohesive and successful, you all have to be giving each other that same respect and attention. And I did appreciate that, because that leads us into quality versus quantity.
Yes, so important on that. It's so important. And, I tell a story in the book about I was hired by a client, actually one of my first clients in my consulting practice when I went out on my own. And they hired me with a very specific goal to increase their lead volume. And in fact, in our statement of work, it was written, increase lead volume. It was really, really clear what their goal was. And I today probably would never have signed up to do something like that. But early in my consulting practice, I thought it would do. And I went in and I did what I normally do. I sit with salespeople. I talked to customers. I interviewed and looked at all the marketing that had been done to date. I spent time with the people who were there. And I discovered really quickly they didn't have a lead volume problem. They had a lead conversion problem. And the quality was really their blocking obstacle. And so I sat down with the CEO and I told him that not only were we not increasing leads, we were going to cut them by 50%. And I thought he was going to have a heart attack. His jaw dropped to the ground. And he's thinking, Samantha, I'm paying you a lot of money, and your advice is to cut my lead volume? Did you not remember our conversation? But he was smart enough and kind and compassionate enough to hear me out. And when we really looked at the data, it showed us no salesperson actually wants more leads. I know we think of them like hungry salespeople sitting at the dinner table pounding, I want leads. But the truth is they want more opportunities. And so when we focus on lead volume, we are focusing on the wrong thing, and it creates artificial data pumping into the system that's actually maybe not ready for our business or not really ideal for our business. And so by switching to focus on quality, we're much more impactful to the business. Now, I say all that, but I want to clarify, you need some certain level of volume to sustain your business. So I'm not suggesting that we never think about how many people we reach and how many opportunities we need to create. But marketing has swung the pendulum historically just way too far towards volume, just stick everything in the top of the funnel. And we need to make sure that we balance that with the quality we're delivering that's actually people that our business can serve in a meaningful way.
I'm going to cut you off a little bit there because we know this. Everybody's telling us this. The difference is, and there are a lot of books out there, I read a lot of them. I'm going back to your book, though, again. And you're saying the same stuff, but you're explaining it. Folks, you've got to go look for her book because in it gives you these guides and some suggested paths and questions and different tactics you can use. And one of the biggest pieces of advice is on page 59, and it says, stop chasing the C-suite.
Yes.
And that is not our ultimate goal ever, even though we all think it is, because they're the heavy hitters. And they really aren't, though, because if they're good, they've hired the good people to make the decisions for them and recommendations for them to say, so the C person can just say, if that's what you think, I trust you, let's do it. So I love, starting on page 59, folks.
Well, I love that you have that page number memorized. That's great. And I thank you for bringing that up, because I think the goal of this book is, look, you're not going to hear some new thing you've never thought about or no one else has said. But what I hope it does is show people case studies proving that these methods work and how to do them, and real practical tips for implementing it in your organization, and not just doing it, but bringing your company with you, giving you the tools to explain to the CEO or to the head of sales why cutting leads is actually going to drive 25% increase in revenue, which we did in that particular case, right? And help them understand what we sometimes as marketers intuitively know, but we have a hard time convincing the rest of the organization this is the right path for us to take. And the book shows us how to have some quick wins and how to do some things so that we can build that trust and that relationship and move forward together with our friends in sales. So as much as we joke about those relationships, those tensions are often really real, and we have to break them down if we want to be bigger, faster, grow more, be more strategic in what we focus on.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. I'm Susan Finch. This is CRM Radio at crmradio.today. You can catch all of our replays. I'm on with Samantha Stone, the author of Unleash Possible. And Paul, we'll take a break and come right back.
We know you rely on your CRM system, and it's usually a love-hate relationship. Most CRM systems, well, let's face it, they're expensive. They're hard to understand. People don't use them properly. And you're probably paying for features that you don't even want. If that's your case, then maybe it's time to simplify. It's time to get more from your CRM. Why don't you go back to the original? Trust Goldmine. We helped pioneer the industry, after all. Goldmine CRM is, well, it's simple, it's affordable, and it's proven. If all those sound appealing to you, if you're just tired of the CRM headaches that you're getting from trying to implement something that's just too complicated, too expensive, and too much for you to figure out, then why not go back to the original? Visit Goldmine today, goldmine.com.
Okay, we're back with Samantha Stone, and I am diving right in because we have very few minutes left. So I want to talk about some of your outbound tactics that are in your book, Unleash Possible. This is Samantha Stone, author, marketing expert. It is a marketing playbook that is so relatable and easy to implement. I mean, I love Matt Hines' book too. Yours gave me a whole different level of other things and brought down some things that I needed simplified a little bit more and made into actionable items. So this, real quick, let's go through say goodbye to no-shows, the event subject. When you invite people, go for it. Page 88.
You know, I'm so glad that you brought up. It's such a simple little obvious thing that for years I had ignored. We spend an enormous amount of effort setting up meetings with prospective buyers. We do all kinds of campaigns to attract them. Our salespeople talk to them, and we put all this effort into convincing them to take a meeting. And then we send them a calendar invite, and in it says demo or follow up or nothing.
Boring is what it says. It says boring. Think about evites that go out. Don't you want them to dance at you and make something, I want to go to this thing. You hit it though. You're subject.
And then I look at the calendar, and we all look at our calendar our day, and it's packed, right? My meeting isn't the only thing this person is doing that day. And I look and I have all this stuff, and I go, demo, follow. Yeah, I've got something else to do. And I skip it, and I don't show up. And we as marketers put tremendous effort into subject lines for our email campaigns and advertising copy. And we don't help salespeople at the most crucial moment of convincing people to show up. And so there is some recommendations in there how to really rethink and think about when I'm on my phone, right? My calendar, I don't get the benefit of a big long description. I have my little subject line, and that's words. How do we use that to remind people why they took the meeting in the first place? Because it may be a week after you spoke, or a day after you spoke, or sometimes 3 weeks after I spoke. And why should they take that meeting when the crisis for the day has popped up for them?
Okay, so this is the nugget from this show. If you get nothing else out of this show and you're a dope and don't go buy her book, know that you're missing out on page 88, where it starts to explain all of this and the logic and some suggested ideas too. And you look at yours like, oh my gosh, that sounds so much better than my stupid event invites. I'm going to jump right in though to page 119, personas. And the reason why this one is important to me is because I hear everybody talking about buyer personas. And this is the first time I have understood it clearly. And yes, I am admitting that because I thought I knew. And you defined it for me in such a way that made it so simple. And I love the idea of the cutouts around the office of your personas. Yeah. What a great, fun idea to have in the office.
Well, first of all, thank you for your comment on personas, because one of the things that I think stops people from using them is they think they're incredibly hard to do, and they don't really understand how to do them. So I'm really thrilled that someone with your experience has some new ways of thinking about it. And you mentioned the cutouts in the office. One of the things that happens is sometimes we go through the effort, we actually create personas, and marketing uses them a little, and no one in the company really understands what they are. And I have, for years, suggested that we actually physically put those big life-size cutouts in the office of our personas to remind us who they are. I have a client who did a recent project, and every time I walk in their office, I do nothing but smile. And it's not just because they have the cutouts, it's because how they're using them. Every time, and I go into their office probably 2 times a month, 3 times a month, someone different, not in marketing, comes up to me and says, Samantha, you'd be so happy. You should have overheard the conversation we just had. We were talking about Donna, their dispatch manager, or we were talking about, and it just proves that visual reminder helps it seep into the entire organization. And I love that they want to make me happy and let me know what they're doing, and they're so proud of it. But they should be, because we sometimes put them up in, as Katie Martell says, PDF purgatory. They get put up into some shelf somewhere, and we forget about all that really important insight. And things like the cutouts and using names and all those techniques are really, really helpful for taking benefit out of all that research that you did.
I worked for a company, and we had a lot of clients. We had a lot of long-term clients, and we had clients that you would lose once in a while. And things would happen in incidents. And when you work with a team for a long time, you speak in shorthand. And so you will cite that incident, which in a way does the same thing. It's like, oh, wait, this is feeling like hoop earrings. And it brings back that whole persona of that person, everything she was about, and what set her off. And these are our red flags. We need to watch for that. And it's the same type of thing. I don't think we always realize when we're relating old stories and anecdotes and memories of things that we're actually talking about personas.
Without a doubt. And people think that personas take a specific form, or sort of these static things I create once I go off and do research. And there's lots of tips in here on how to do that research. And I encourage you to do it.
Lots of tips.
More than you probably would need to read it a few times, right? But the whole point is we're talking to customers and we're relating our business and everything we do to the people who use our products and services. And by doing that and ingraining it in our culture, it really does make for legends, right? It makes those stories that help us understand how to train new people, how to remind ourselves of when we get in those bad habits of reading copy for ourselves and saying, I don't like that phrasing.
Right.
I'm buying my own services. So how does my buyer feel about that phrase, for example?
Which brings me to the last highlight we can cover in the show, and that starts about page 140, the question bank. And I loved the questions that you had in there. As I'm reading some of the questions that she covers in her book, folks, it made you want to know the answers to those for whomever you're speaking to. Like, I want to know that about somebody. So, and so the person receiving that question, though, also wants you to know that about them. We're creatures of wanting to connect. We're community creatures. That's what we are. And so we're always trying to build those connections, whether we admit it or not. And those questions made it very non-threatening, very relatable, but valuable information to be able to build those personas. It all plays together. And you spelled it out so well, and it's a really thick part of the book. It took me a long time to get through that, but me and my little highlighter, we did it.
I love that.
So there was a lot of valuable tips. Samantha, this has just flown. Our time goes super fast. One takeaway you want to give everybody, other than go to visit your website, which is?
Yes, please do. Unleashpossible.com.
Okay.
Please go visit. But I think there's one thing that I want people to take away is that we can do a lot more than we think we can. And we have an obligation to take the time to do the qualitative research and to build those relationships with sales and not let our very long to-do lists take over what we're doing. When we measure the right things and we give ourselves permission and hold ourselves accountable to doing that kind of relationship building with our buyers, with our peers in the organizations, we really get better at what we really want, which is to drive growth in our businesses.
And drive it as a team, not drive it as two divisive forces constantly battling. And you also have ways of bringing everybody together. So I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. This has been a wonderful, very fast show, but we covered a lot of ground. And please, folks, check out her book. You want to learn about personas a little bit deeper. You want to get some tangible and implementable ideas for your questions, for your surveying before. She'll explain why you need to take the time to ask those questions, even though it's easier and you think you know it all about your clients. You don't. And you don't always know why they liked you so much until you start to really ask them different questions. So, Samantha Stone, thank you so much for being on CRM Radio. I'm Susan Finch. I was your host today, and we will see you or hear you next week.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was fun. I can stop recording.